Dear students, in this unit we deal with one of the oldest monotheist religions, Judaism. Here we will explore an overview of Judaism, including its origins, key religious texts, core beliefs, rituals and ceremonies, its impact on culture and society, history of Judaism, and examine its enduring legacy and influence. Now, my dear students, you must know the objectives of this Judaism. By the end of the course, the students will be able to appreciate the uniqueness of Judaism as a religion, as to be its and practices. Appreciate the uniqueness of Judaism as a religion and its beliefs and practices. Present a historical picture of the evolution of Judaism. Find the influence of Judaism on the society. Now, in the introduction, Judaism is an Abrahamic monotheistic and ethnic religion comprising the collective religious, cultural and legal tradition and the civilization of the Jewish people. It is one of the oldest and oldest monotheist religions with a rich history and complex set of beliefs and practices. It is believed to have been founded more than 3000 years ago in the Middle East in what is now modern day Israel. Jews claim that doctrine concerning the one true God was communicated to Adam, and this was passed on through the unbroken chain of ancestors such as Seth, Noah, etc. down to Abraham. The book of Joshua testifies that Abraham too worshipped strange gods in Chaldeo. In other words, the religion of the tribe of Abraham came from the Chaldeans and they migrated first by way of Haran to Canaan and then to Egypt. It is the tribe that was later transformed into religion of Judaism. Over the centuries, Judaism has evolved into a diverse and multifactored tradition with a rich history, literature and culture. Even though it is spanning thousands of years, its core principles and teachings have remained remarkably resilient. Within Judaism, there was a variety of religious movements, most of which emerged from rabbinic Judaism, which holds that God revealed his laws and commandments to Moses on Mount Sinai in the form of both written and oral Torah. Historically, all or part of this assertion was challenged by various groups such as the Sadducees and Hellenistic Judaism during the Second Temple period, the Harites during the early and later medieval period, and among segments of the modern non-orthodox dominations. Some modern branches of Judaism, such as humanistic Judaism, may be considered secular or non-theistic. Today, the largest Jewish religious movements are Orthodox Judaism, Conservative Judaism and the Reform Judaism or Modern Judaism. Major sources of difference between these groups are their approaches to halakha, which means Jewish law, the authority of rabbinic tradition and the significance of the state of Israel. Orthodox Judaism maintains that the Torah and the halakha are divine in origin, eternal and unalterable, and that they should be strictly followed. Conservative and Reform Judaism are more liberal, with the Conservative Judaism generally promoting or traditionalist interpretation of Judaism requirements than Reform Judaism. A typical Reform position is that halakha should be viewed as a set of general guidelines rather than as a set of restrictions and obligations whose observance is required of all Jews. Historically, special courts enforce halakha Today, these codes still exist, but the practice of Judaism is mostly voluntary. Authority on theological and legal matters is not vested in any one person or organization, but in the sacred texts and the rabbis and the scholars who interpret them. Now, let us see the origin of Judaism. Judaism traces its roots back to ancient Mesopotamia in what is now modern day Israel and Palestine. According to Jewish tradition, its founder and patriarch is Abraham, who made covenant with God. This covenant established a special relationship between God and the Jewish people, setting them apart as a chosen nation or chosen people. Judaism traces its origins back to ancient Israel, with its foundational text being the Torah, comprising the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. Even you can also see in the Old Testament also. According to the Jewish tradition, the Torah was revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai, serves as a religious and ethical guide for Jewish life. Now, my dear students, you must know the religious text. Now, let us see. Jews are often called the people of the book. They lay great stress on sacred scriptures, the study and the interpretation. The Hebrew Bible is the foundation of Judaism. In Jewish circles, it is known as Tanakh, the acronym for Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, Nevi'im, the prophets, and Ketubim, and the other writings. The Torah and the central religious text of Judaism. The Hebrew word the Torah can mean teaching, which means law or instruction. It is composed of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Old Testament Christianity. These books include Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The Torah contains commandments, stories of the Israelites, and guidance for moral and ethical living. In addition to the Torah, Judaism reveres a vast body of sacred texts, including the Talmud, Midrasha, Mishnah, and various commentaries. These texts provide detailed interpretations of the Torah, legal rulings, ethical teachings, and philosophical discussions. The rabbinic traditional play crucial role in interpreting and applying Jewish law, halakha, to contemporary contexts, allowing for flexibility and adaptability within the religion. Talmud's accumulation of Jewish oral law and the commentaries on the Torah. The Talmud contains discussion, debates, interpretation of the Jewish law, ethics, philosophy, and history. Judaism text traditions and the values strongly influence later Abrahamic religions, including Christianity and Islam. Now, let us see the core beliefs of Judaism. Judaism is founded on the beliefs in one God, Yahweh, who is omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent. Yahweh is seen as a creator of the universe and the ultimate source of morality and justice. These beliefs is encapsulated in Shema, a central prayer in Judaism that proclaims, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." This belief in one God is the foundation of Jewish monotheism, which holds that God is the creator and the sustainer of the universe, and of all human beings are created in God's image. Jews also believe in the covenant, an agreement between God and the Jewish people, which establishes a unique and special relationship. Jews believe that God entered into a covenant with Abraham, promising to bless him and his descendants. This covenant extends to all Jewish people and includes obligations to follow God's commandments and live according to his moral and ethical teachings. Jews believe that God is eternal, all powerful, and has a personal relationship with his chosen people, and the concept of monotheism sets Judaism apart from the polytheistic religions that were prevalent in ancient times. Judaism places a strong emphasis on ethical conduct and the pursuit of justice. The concept of tikkun olam, or repairing the world, underscore the responsibility to engage the acts of kindness, social justice, charity, and compassion for the poor and vulnerable members of society. The 10 Commandments and the teachings of the prophets serves a moral guidelines urging Jews to uphold ethical principles in all aspects of life. The 10 Commandments, which are central to Jewish law, emphasize the importance of honoring one's parents, not killing, stealing, or bearing false witness, and observing the Sabbath. The another key belief in the Judaism, the concept of teshuvah or repentance. This involves acknowledging mistakes and sins and making a sincere effort to atone for them and improve one's behavior. Teshuvah is a key element of High Holy Days, a period of introspection and reflection that takes place in the fall each year. Rituals, ceremonies, and practice of Judaism. Now let us see. Judaism has a rich and complex system of religious practices, ceremonies, and rituals which are designed to connect believers with God and with a large Jewish community that are an integral part of Jewish life. Now let us see some of the key principles of Judaism include: first one, Sabbath, the weekly day of rest, worship observed from Friday evening to Saturday evening. It involves lighting candles, reciting prayers, sharing festival meals. It is a sacred time of prayer, study, and family gather. Now prayer. Jewish prayer is a central aspect of religious practices, with a 3 daily prayers, services, and additional prayers on the Sabbath and holidays. Prayer is conducted in Hebrew, the sacred language of Judaism, and often involves reciting liturgical texts from the Torah, Psalms, and other Jewish sources. Kosher dietary laws. Jews adhere to specific dietary laws outlined in the Torah. Judaism has a complex system of dietary laws known as the kashrut, which regulates what foods Jews are allowed to eat. Certain foods such as pork and shellfish are forbidden, while others must be prepared and consumed in accordance with the specific guidelines. The observance of dietary laws, kashrut, promotes mindfulness and self-discipline in food choices. Life cycle events. Judaism has a rich tradition of life cycle events, including circumcision for males, bar and bat mitzvah ceremonies for young adults, marriage ceremonies, and funeral rites. A Jewish boy is circumcised on the 8th day of his birth. This is a rite of the Brit Milah. The meaning or the naming of a Jewish girl on the 8th day is known as the Sabbath habit. When the boy attains 7 years of age, he is taken to a rabbi to study the scriptures. This continues up to the age of 12, when he takes a temporary vow to a student of the Torah. At the age of 13, he becomes a son of the commandments, that is, he is a full member of the Jewish community. He chants a portion from the Bible. Special ceremony in the synagogue when the temple existed it was done there. In the modern times, conservative and reformed Jews have a similar ceremony for a girl called as a daughter of the commandment. An Orthodox Jewish wedding or a marriage contract signed by the two witnesses prepared for forbidden and bride and groom. The document states groom's obligations toward his bride. The marriage takes place under a chuppah, which symbolizes the union of bride and groom and their future home. They sip wine from a single cup to show the common life they share. At the end of the ceremony, the groom breaks a glass as a reminder, in the midst of his happiness, of the destruction of the temple. Jews observe certain rituals in connection with the mourning. The members of the immediate family sit Shiva after the funeral services. Shiva and the Hebrew means 7. They stay in their homes for 7 days but do not mourn on the Sabbath. Mourners recite the Kaddish prayer written in Aramaic. Orthodox Jews observe mourning for parents for 1 year and repeat the Kaddish daily. They observe the anniversary of the death and recite memorial prayers on holy days. Holy days or festivals. Judaism has a number of major holidays throughout the year, including the high holy days, Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles, and Hanukkah. These holidays are often marked by the special prayers, rituals, and traditions that are varying according to your local customs and traditions. Jewish New Year and the Day of Atonement are the most important and solemn days on the Jewish calendar, involving repentance, prayer, and fasting. Passover and Hanukkah, Festival of Lights, and the high holidays are celebrated with joy, reflection, and commemoration of historic events. Community and synagogue. The synagogue serves as a central place of worship, study, and communal gatherings in Judaism. It provides a space for prayer, Torah study, and the observance of religious festivals. In the synagogue, they kept an ark where the scroll of the Torah is placed, is read, and often an eternal high where a lamp is kept burning always. There was also pulpit facing the ark where the Hazan, prayer leader, stands while praying. A yeshiva is a Jewish school of learning and mikvah is the ritual bath. Jewish communities are characterized by a sense of shared heritage, collective responsibility, and mutual support. The role of Rabbi as a spiritual leader and teacher is vital in guiding the community's religious and ethical life. Impact on culture and society. Judaism has had a profound impact on culture, philosophy, and ethics throughout its history. Jewish values such as justice, compassion, and the pursuit of knowledge have influenced the development of Western civilization. Jewish scholars and thinkers have made significant contributions to various fields, including theology, philosophy, science, literature, and the arts. Furthermore, Judaism emphasizes on social justice and repairing the world has inspired Jewish communities to engage in philanthropic efforts and advocacy for human rights. Now, let us see the history of Judaism. A broad overview of the history of Judaism from its beginnings until the present day. The history of Judaism until 164 BCE. The Old Testament, the history of Judaism, is inseparable from the history of Jews themselves. The early part of the story is told in the Hebrew Bible, that means Old Testament. It describes how God chose the Jews to be an example to the world, and how God and His chosen people worked out their relationship. It was astronomy relationship much of the time, and one of the fascinating things about the Jewish history is to watch God changing and developing alongside His people. Bronze Age. The Jewish history begins during the Bronze Age in the Middle East. The birth of the Jewish people and the start of Judaism is told in the first 5 books of the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament. God chose Abraham to be the father of a people who would have be special and example of good behavior and holiness to the rest of the world. God guided the Jewish people through many troubles at the same time. Even at the time of Moses, He gave them a set of rules by which they should live, including the 10 commandments. Now let us see the birth of Judaism. This was the beginning of Judaism as a structured religion. The Jews, under God's guidance, became a powerful people with the kings such as Saul, David and Solomon, who built the first great temple. From then on, Jewish worship was focused on temple as contained the Ark of the Covenant and was the only place where certain rites could be carried out. The kingdom declines around 920 BCE. The kingdom fell apart and the Jewish people split into groups. This was the time of the prophets. Around 600 BCE, the temple was destroyed and the Jewish leadership was killed. Many Jews were sent into exile in Babylon. Although the Jews were soon allowed to return home, and many stayed in exile, beginning the Jewish tradition of the diaspora, living away from Israel. Rebuilding a Jewish kingdom. The Jews grew in strength throughout the next 300 years BCE, despite the lands being ruled by foreign powers. At the same time, they became more able to practice their faith freely, led by scribes and teachers who explained and interpreted the Bible. In 175 BCE, the king of Syria dishonored the temple and implemented a series of laws. Syria is honored the temple and implemented a series of laws aiming to wipe out Judaism in favor of Zeus worship. There was a revolt 164 BCE and the temple was restored. Their revolt is celebrated in the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. History of Judaism 63 BCE to 1086 CE. Roman times. For a period, Jewish people governed themselves, again were at peace with the Roman Empire. But internal divisions weakened it. The Jewish king demand allowed the Romans to establish control in 63 BCE. In the years that followed, the Jewish people were taxed and oppressed by the series of puppets, the rulers who neglected the practice of Judaism. The priests or Sadducees were allied with the rulers and lost favor with the people, who turned increasingly to the Pharisees or scribes. These were also known as rabbis, meaning teachers. Years first CE, what is nowadays called the current era, traditionally begins with the birth of a Jewish teacher called Jesus. His followers came to believe he was the promised Messiah and later split away from Judaism to found Christianity, a faith whose roots are firmly in Judaism. First C. 70 Rabbinic Judaism. The rabbis encouraged the Jewish people to observe ethical laws in all aspects of life and observe a cycle of prayer and festivals in the home and at a synagogue. This involved a major thing of Jewish life. Although the temple still stood, its uniqueness place as a focus of Jewish prayer and practice was diminished. Many synagogues have been founded in the Palestine and right around the Jewish diaspora. Great teachings academies were founded in the 1st century BCE with the scholars discussing and debating God's law. The most well known of the earliest teachers were Hillel and his contemporary Shammai. 70 to 200 CE, the destruction of the temple. This was a period of great change. Political, religious, cultural and social turmoil abundant in Palestine. The Jewish academies flourished, but many Jews could not bear being ruled over by the Romans. During the first 150 years CE, the Jews twice rebelled against the Roman leaders. Both rebellions were brutally put down and were followed by stern restrictions on Jewish freedom. The first revolt in 70 CE led to the destruction of the temple. This brought an end to temple worship and is still perceived by traditional Jews as the biggest trauma in Jewish history. It is marked by the fast day of Tisha B'Av, meaning the 9th day of the month. A second revolt in 132 CE resulted in the death of the hundreds of thousands of Jews, the enslaving of thousands of others and the banning of Jews from Jerusalem. 202 700 CE, the Mishnah and Talmud. Between 200 and 700 CE, Judaism developed rapidly. Following the twins religious and the political traumas, the academies moved to new centers both in Palestine and in the diaspora. A sense of urgency had taken hold. It was considered vital to write down the teachings of the rabbis so that Judaism could continue. Around 200 CE, the scholars compiled the Mishnah, the collection of teachings, sayings, interpretation of the early rabbis. The academies continued their work and several generations of rabbis followed. Their teachings were compiled in the Talmud, which expands on the interpretations of the Mishnah and establishment, the encompassing guide to life. The Talmud exists in two forms. The first was finalized around the 3rd century CE in Palestine, and the second and the superior version was completed during the 5th century CE in Babylon. During this period, Jews were allowed to become Roman citizens, but later were forbidden to own Christian slaves or to marry Christians. In 439 CE, the Romans banned synagogue buildings and barred Jews from official jobs. The Golden Age Jews in Spain. The years either the side of the 1000 CE were the Golden Age of the Jews in Spain, coexisting happy with the country's Islamic rulers. Of Jews developed a flourishing study of science, Hebrew literature and the Talmud. Despite an attempt to forcibly convert all Jews to Islam in 1086 CE, this golden age continued. At around his time, the first Jews were recorded in Britain. History from 1090 to 1600, the Crusades. The next millennium began with the Crusades, military operations by Christians countries to capture the Holy Land. The armies of the two first crusades attacked Jewish communities on their way to Palestine, especially in Germany. When the Crusaders captured Jerusalem, they laughed and enslaved thousands of Jews as well as Muslims. Following the example of the Romans earlier, they banned Jews from the city. In Britain, the Jewish population increased, benefiting from the protection of the Henry I. The bad times returned. The 1100 were a seriously bad period. Jews were driven from the southern Spain by a Berber invasion. Serious anti-Jewish incidents began to occur in Europe. In France, Jews were accused ritually murdering a child. In England, Jews were murdered while trying to give gifts to the king at Richard's first coronation. 150 Jews were mass accredited in York. In 1215, the Catholic Church ordered Jews to live in segregated or as an toward distinctive clothes. Expulsions. In England, the Jews faced increasing restrictions during the 13th century, and in 1290 they were all expelled from England. Shortly afterwards, the Jews were expelled from France. In 1478, the Jews in Spain suffered under a Spanish investigation, and in 1492, Jews were expelled from Spain altogether. The same thing happened in Portugal in 1497. 50 years later in Germany, Martin Luther, the founder of Protestant Christianity, preached viciously against the Jews. History from 1650 to 1860s, Jews returned to Britain. This was period of Jewish expansion. Jews were allowed to return to England and the rights of citizenship steadily increased. In 1760, the main representative organization for British Jewry, the Board of Deputies of British Jews, was founded. Jews were first recorded in American 1648. Now let us see the Hasidism. What is Hasidism? It is a mystical Jewish movement founded in Poland and Central European in the 18th century. This movement included mysticism, holiness in everyday life, both intelligible and enjoyable, helped it achieve great popularity among ordinary Jews. However, it is also led to the division within the Judaism, as many in the religious establishment were strongly against it. Now let us see that the persecution in Central Europe. Towards the end of the 1700s, Jews began to suffer persecution in Central Europe and Russia. They began to be restricted to living in a particular areas of the country called the Pale. The birth of Reform Judaism. The 19th century, another new movement appeared in Judaism. This was Reform Judaism, which began in Germany and held that Jewish law and rituals should move with the times and not to be fixed. It introduced many changes to worship and the customs and grew rapidly into a strong movement. It continues to flourish in Europe and the USA. Good news and bad news. As the 19th century continued, many countries gradually withdrew restrictions on Jews. The UK allowed its Jewish citizens and the same rights as others by 1860s. But at the same time, Jews came under increasing pressure in Central Europe and Russia. There were brutal programs against the Jewish, which they were ejected from their homes and villages and cruelly treated. Some of the persecution is told in the musicals How Fiddler on the Roof. In Israel, Jewish culture was having a significant rebirth as the Hebrew language was recreated from the language of history and the religion into a language of everyday life. The 20th century UK and the USA. In Britain and America, this was century Jewish immigration. with the great numbers of Jewish people arriving to escape the persecutions in Poland and Russia. The Jewish population of Britain increased by 2,50,000 in 30 years. It was at a time that the east end of London became center of Jewish life in Britain. However, in 1905, the UK passed a law that slowed immigration to mere trickle. The birth of Zionism. The Zionist movement, whose aim was to create a Jewish state, was rooted in centuries of Jewish prayer and yearning to return to the land of Israel. Political Zionism begins in the mid-19th century. Towards the end of the century, it gained strength as many Jews began to feel that the only way they could live in safely would be to have a country of their own. In 1917, the British government agreed that a national home for Jewish people should be established in Palestine. Following the First World War, the British governed the religion in preparation for a permanent political arrangement. Over the next few years, Jewish immigration increased and the important institutions were founded, such as the Israel Chief Rabbinate and Hebrew University. The Holocaust. The Jewish history of the 1930s and 1940s is dominated by the Holocaust and the implementation on an industrial scale of a plan to wipe the whole Jewish people from face of Europe. The plan was carried out by the Nazi government of Germany. During the Holocaust, 6 million Jewish people were murdered, 1 million of them are children. The events of the Holocaust have shaped Jewish thinking and the thinking of other people about Jewish issues over since. War crimes trials of those involved in the Holocaust continue to this day. The tragedy affected much of this religious thinking of Jews as they tried to make sense of God, who could allow such a thing to happen to his chosen people. The State of Israel. The second defining Jewish event of the century was the achievement of the Zionist movement in the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. There had been strong and paramilitary opposition to British colonial rule for many years, and in 1947, the United Nations agreed a plan to partition the land between Jews and Arabs. In May 1948, the British government withdrew the enforcers. Immediately, the surrounding Arab states invaded and the new Jewish state was forced to fight the first several major wars. Notable among these were Six-Day War in 1967 and the Yom Kippur War in 1973. The first steps towards a permanent peace came when Israel signed a peace treaty with Egypt in 1979 and with the Jordan in 1994. For most of its history, Israel has had an uneasy relationship with the Arab states that surround it and has been greatly sustained by the help and support of the USA, where the Jewish community is large and influential. The 21st century began with a great political uncertainty over Israel and its relationship with the Palestinian people, and this continues. Okay, my dear students, so far we have discussed about Judaism. Hope you all understood today's lecture. All the best.